Hey guys, TommyBryson here, and Jesse Livermore is actually the $100 million man. And the way he made his money and the way the story ends is actually very unfortunate, but kind of very crazy. So he was actually born in 1877, and later in his life, he actually became a stock trader, aka an investor. And during the entire 1929 market crash, when people were literally jumping from buildings because basically they could not handle the pressure, well, Jesse actually shorted the market, meaning he was betting that the market was actually going to go down. And just like that, in 1929, his bet paid off. How much did it pay off? It paid off the equivalent of $100 million back then in 1929. Let me stop you there. In today's money, that would be, adjusted for inflation, around $1.3 million. So if you had invested that money and he had made 5% on that money for the rest of his life, very possible a trash return, he would have made around $5.6 million per month for the rest of his life, or the equivalent 5.4, or the equivalent of $180,000 per day. Now, you could probably say, Tommy, that's enough. I won the game. That's it. Game over. But have you ever played a game and you won and you got very confident? Your ego became like a massive thing? Well, Jesse didn't stop there. He kept making bigger bets, bigger bets, bigger bets. By the way, this is history. Look it up. Then by 1932, just 3 years later, Jesse lost literally everything. Everything. Those $100 million were gone in just 3 years by making bigger and bigger and bigger bets. When he lost all this money, he disappeared for like 2 to 3 days. His wife was worried. His in-laws were worried. Everyone was worried. After 3 days, he came back home. Things seemed normal, but by that point, his faith was kind of like sealed and nothing was actually going to be the same again. So literally 8 years later, he took his own life. He left a letter and he died with a negative net worth. Over his lifetime, he made money, he lost money. He made money, he lost money. So Tommy, what's the lesson here of the $100 million man? The lesson is, a lot of people today, they live by Jesse's principles when it comes to day trading. Although the guy that invented them had a very bad performance in a sense, because he made money, he lost money. It's kind of like gambling in a sense, right? So what's the lesson here, guys? It's that a lot of people that do day trading and they take risks in the market, they follow Jesse's principles. Although, for example, the man who invented it did not have a good success track record overall because of everything that happened, because it's a lot like gambling. So if you ask me, what's the lesson in this story? The lesson is, if you risk what you need and what you already have for what you don't need and don't have, it is a foolish bet. Think about that for a second and really keep that and write that down and put it on a piece of paper and keep it there forever. And that's a quote by Warren Buffett. But my goal for this video is to help you, the average person, the average investor, although most of us will not be billionaires like Jesse, right? The goal is that whether you make a few thousand, 100,000, few million, the goal is that you don't end up like Jesse, where you kind of like lose everything in the end. Because making money is one thing, but keeping it is a whole different story. So in this video, I'm going to break that down. So do me a favor, like this video, on top of that, also subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you get notified, because I post everything about money. Now, the second story I really want to share with you guys is this one. It's about a rich people party, where basically, by the way, this is a real story. None of this stuff is fiction. There was actually a party where the people that attended this party were very, very wealthy. And the host was actually a hedge fund manager. But one of the attendees was actually John C. Bogle, the guy that actually started and created, for example, the index funds, that had a net worth of around $80 million. And another guest was basically Joseph Heller. the actual author of Catch 22, the book that sold over 10 million copies, and the movie made around $24 million. However, the hedge fund manager made so much money that in 1 year, he made more money than that book made combined in the entire history of it. And when John C. Bogle told this to the author, Joseph Heller, Joseph said, you know, John, you're right about that. He has a lot more money than I do, but one thing he will never have is enough. And what I mean by that, guys, or what he meant by that is, guys, that a lot of us, we play the comparison game. And the comparison game is, although I have 10,000, another person has 20,000. And studies shows that basically people that tend to compare themselves a lot to other people and say, well, they have this and they have that, aka Instagram, Facebook, and social media overall, they do this stuff. The idea is that these people tend to be a lot more depressed and suffer from depression because that comparison game doesn't lead to anything actually happy. So the goal is to have enough to be happy with whatever you have. But not to say, because when I thought about that concept of enough, I always picture my grandma having a stove, having a fridge, and saying, I have a home, and this right here is enough. But enough can be a lot. Enough can be enough for you and your family to live the lifestyle that you actually want to live. But if all you want to do is keep upgrading and upgrading and upgrading and chasing, this game never ends. A little side story here I do want to add is, you know, you have a lot of baseball players and they start off, for example, as a rookie. And they might get a contract if they're very good for $3 million. But the veteran might get a contract for a few $100 million. But then the veteran might compare himself to the hedge fund manager making a few $100 million just in 1 year. And then that hedge fund manager might compare himself to Warren Buffett making just $900 million just from dividends every single year, right? So this comparison game, it never ends. And for Warren Buffett, you have Jeff Bezos making the equivalent of $300 million every single day, which is an insane amount. Yeah, that's also a fact. So this game leads to nothing good. The lesson here is enough. What is your number? How much money is enough for you? For me, that is $40,000 a year in passive income. And for me, that is enough with a paid off home, no debt, and a job that I basically love, but I don't need the money from. That for me is enough. What is your number? Comment down below. Now, here are a few lessons that unfortunately you never learn from the investing world. And the first lesson is learn to be fearful. The game we play as investors is not a sprint, it's a longevity game. And the goal is to out-invest everyone. And the only way to do this is by investing in a correct manner and not taking a bunch of risks. So when you look at, for example, people that have a paid off home, have cash, and don't invest into risky investments, people might call them stupid, but in reality, when you look at Warren Buffett, he has $144 billion literally in cash. And he says, it might sound like a lot, but it's not really that much compared to what the worst scenario basically is. The idea is you want to set yourself up for self-independence so when things go wrong, you can continue to invest because recessions, depressions, and market downturns will continue to flow. And if all you do is take risky investments, eventually you won't have the capital or you'll have to sell and come out the market, and that is not what you want to do. So learn to be fearful. Think about survival. Think about longevity. And it sounds like a very scarcity mindset, not as positive all the time, but it is a mindset that has made Warren Buffett a billionaire. And it continues to work till this day. The second lesson is learn to maintain your status. Here's another story you probably never heard about in your entire life. But there was a man called Rajat Gupta. And this guy was worth over $100 million. And he worked on the board of Goldman Sachs, that fancy bank. Well, when that bank was in trouble and Warren Buffett said, I'm going to help with $5 billion, Rajat Gupta basically knew this because he worked on the board. And then around 17 to 1 minute later, he went ahead and basically executed a trade, and that's called insider trading. He made an easy $1 million because this guy's entire goal was to become a billionaire, and he was willing to do whatever it took to actually do that. And he continued to do this over and over and over again, and that made him a cool $17 million in addition. He later got caught, went to prison for 2 years, lost his career, lost his reputation, and lost basically everything. And you know, I know some people that I know, and you know, and this might be you, by the way, might say, Tommy, I'm down to lose 2 years of my life by going to prison, lose my reputation, lose everything, and come out being a millionaire. I don't care. You know, those people, you want to look out for them because they have no boundaries and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get to where they want to go, including committing illegal things. And that's not the game I want to play. So, like Warren Buffett says, it can take 20 years to build a reputation, but it can take 5 minutes to basically ruin it. Learn to maintain what you already have. That's very important. The third lesson is learn to enjoy the present and not just keep seeking more and seeking more. And this is very hard for most investors because all we really want to do is make more and more money. But once you understand that this money is going to make you X amount, if you invest in X amount, it'll make you that much, then you kind of just let go and let the entire thing flow. I won't give you that much explanation because this one is basically self-explanatory. But one thing I will say is ask yourself, what aren't you appreciating in this current present by having your mind live somewhere you can't live, aka the future? And that's very deep. And I learned that a long time ago because my mindset was always on the future, the future, the future. But I never appreciated anything that I accomplished or anything that I basically did or any of the people around me because I always thought about, well, if we do this for the future, things will be different. Learn to appreciate the current moment instead of just seeking, seeking, seeking. And these are lessons you probably will not hear from another investor because most people don't focus on this at all because it's just a sprint for them. Now, the last thing I do want to share with you guys is the secrets to becoming wealthy in the stock market. Now, if I follow my investment strategy and I live to be Warren Buffett's age of 92 years old, by the time I turn his age, I'll have around $1.3 billion without having to spend, for example, I don't know, 8 hours every single day just reading about investments and doing what he does. And to me, that's a lot of money. But by the time I turn 60, 65, I'll have $50 million in there. You know, the idea is, guys, this thing actually works. And this thing I mentioned is called compound interest. The reason Warren Buffett is so successful isn't just because he's a good investor, but it's because he started investing at age 10. And by age 30, he already had $1 million net worth. In today's money, that's around 1.9, well, not 9.6 to $9.8 million by the age of 30. If he had started at 30, not at 10, he would have around $11 million. Not anywhere near the hundreds, not hundreds, like more like $130 billion is actually worth right now. So that's the idea, okay? Does that make sense? The point is, longevity, marathon mentality, investing in a fashion that will allow you to keep investing no matter what goes on in the world because you already have your own independence. And for me, that looks like not having a bunch of debts, having a paid off home, having an emergency fund, having a job that you actually enjoy but is also secure. And if you lose it, you have an emergency fund. So this way, you always ensure that when things go wrong, you don't have to worry because you already took care of what really matters, which is what you have right now and what you need right now. So in the end, guys, this video is not really just about the $100 million man, Jesse Livermore, and how he lost all his money, but it's more about the investor greed and the greed to keep going and keep going. And by the way, I have no problem with people making more and more money. I want to make more and more money. But the idea is when you risk everything to get something that you don't need and you don't have, that's not what you want to do. It's to know that what is your enough number to know that I'm not willing to risk this to go beyond to get something I really don't need. So I'll ask you this question, and I'll leave this video with this, okay? What's more important, the beginning of a story or the ending? Because the beginning of Jesse's story might sound amazing, made $100 million, but the ending ends very unfortunately. So focus on what you're doing right now in the present to ensure that when this game is over, you end up on top. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, like, subscribe, hit the bell so you're notified. Any questions, comment down below. On top of that, also watch more content. Another video here. My face is here. Subscribe to the channel. And lastly, if you want to call me, the link is down below for free calls. Thanks for watching. And as always, long-term team out.